program coordinator, Nathalie Nelson Parker here, and it is lit live. We are super excited because I would say, I'm not going to get myself in too much trouble, but the National Network of Young Adults is really blessed just to have so many partners and change makers and world changers who are doing phenomenal things. And I could say that two of my faves are on right now.
All right. You're generous, Nancy.
Thank you.
I have with me the Reverend Neil Christie, Assistant General Secretary of Church and Society, and the OGNNYA Lit Ambassador, the Reverend Kevin Kosh. And we're super excited tonight.
What's up?
We're going to share some really great information. So let's just get to it. Let's start with Reverend Neil. Tell us who you are, what you do, and how did you get to this place of justice work and church and society work?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Nathalie, and thank you everyone who joined. You could have done so many things. Thank you for joining us tonight. So for me, I'm here in Washington, D.C., in the nation's capital, and it's quiet outside. Not many people. And how did I get here? So, I'm a Methodist pastor. I served as a hospital chaplain, a trauma chaplain before coming to Church and Society. Some of my own journey was, my parents from India and Pakistan. We immigrated here in the 1960s. I was first to go to college in this country. I didn't think about that till only recently, but I was the very first in my family to go to college here. Methodist background back in India. And, I have stories about what that's like, but for me, the church has always been there. I was baptized actually in a church where we're the only Indians, and the language was Norwegian in Brooklyn, New York. Now,
in the house.
Now the neighborhood is Chinese and African American. So it moved from the Norwegians to the Indians, now African American, some Puerto Rican, and Chinese. I served. I also worked in after hospitals. I did some prison ministry, and I think I had my conversion experience really working with guys in prison, in maximum security prisons. Went to seminary, went to divinity school, and never thought I'd be going to parish ministry. And one day in the kitchen, that's where I heard God telling me I needed to go, whether I wanted to or not. I needed to go to parish ministry, church ministry, and I did. Worked in food pantries, AIDS ministries, some of the first in Connecticut, in New York, where people living with AIDS, HIV. And then after years in parish ministry, I came to Church and Society educational work. And now I've been one of the assistant general secretaries for 15 years. For a while, it's a blessing and a privilege to do the work I do.
That's amazing. Can you share with us kind of, that those are some milestones, but for someone who's watching right now, who's a young adult, either undergrad or in seminary, and they're like, wow, you figured it out. What was some of the lessons on that way of hearing and discerning and responding to that call? Clearly there was a call on your life.
For me, there was a call on my life. I think when I was 18, again, my friends from India, I'd gone back and forth, but I went on a mission trip when I was 18 to Haiti, and I was working with children, and I could sense who Jesus was in these kids. There was a tuberculosis hospital. I'll never forget it because these kids were praying with me. I saw Jesus for the first time. And I talked to these children who were in Haiti. And I started imagining the importance of mission, the importance of making sure people are fed, receive housing, they receive education, healthcare. But then down the way, I started to ask myself, why are people still hungry? Why are people still without education? Why are people without healthcare? When I worked in prison, when I worked in hospitals, I began to ask these questions. And so for me, the biggest part of my journey was finding mentors who were there to encourage me, chastise me, keep me going when I didn't know what the purpose was for me. The second was taking advantage of every opportunity the church offered me. So there were internships in Washington, D.C. that I did. I had not lived away from home. I was commuting when I was in college. We couldn't afford for me to go away from home. This was the first time I lived with a community, and they were all different ethnicities. It was an internship called an ethnic young adult internship that our agency sponsored. So when I was 20, I was with African American, Asian American, Latino, Latinx, Native American students for the first time, and I started seeing through the eyes of justice. So not just mercy ministry, but justice ministry. I took advantage of what the church offered, and doors were able to open for me. And order came in my life. When the rest of my life was not in order, I could find it, and I could find it with people who were asking some of the hard questions. Why is the world the way it is? Why is it not working? And when I did that, doors would just open for me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Kevin, tell us about who you are and what your journey has been to the place where you are now.
Well, I am Reverend Kevin Kosh Jr. Some people call me Rev Kev. Some people just call me Kev. I'm the Wesley Foundation Director at JSU. I did not see myself going into ministry. I guess that's like a common theme, not just on this conversation call, but even in scripture, like people didn't see themselves going in that route. But when I look at my life, it was the church that has always invested in me. Yeah. I have not always agreed with things that the church is doing or how church is lived out, but I had those people around me who saw something that was great in me, and they always identified that thing with being connected with Christ. I didn't know where I was going to go to college when I was a senior in high school, but my local church connected me with some other schools, and one of those schools that I fell in love with was Russ College in Holly Springs, Mississippi, which is related to the United Methodist Church. I got a higher education because I was connected to the local church, and those people loved on me there. Once I got to my college campus, you're not really tripping off going to church, going to chapel. But I really had some things that I was wrestling with, like with identity. Like I really love African American heritage, and I really wasn't seeing that in the church at large. And so I'm here on this HBCU campus, and now I'm finally being exposed to stuff that's really nourishing me, and I don't necessarily see it in the denomination, which is also investing in me. But lo and behold, we have something called the Black College Fund. And one of my friends introduced me to the Black College Fund, and then being connected with the Black College Fund, I'm going across the country, finding out about other Black College Fund schools. But it wasn't just going on those trips. I started building relationships. And not everybody wanted to be a pastor. Some people had big dreams. Some people were into social justice. And I began to see that the church is really bigger than the four walls. And a calling on your life is bigger than maybe how you perceive it. My dad, who's also a local pastor, I would ask him these tough questions. And one question I would ask him is, if we're supposed to be winning people to Christ, why am I only in church on Sunday morning? Why am I not at the mosque? Why am I not on the street corner? Because at that point in my life, I was feeling like it was more image driven than me actually having a relationship and being connectional. And my dad, he said something that kind of changed my life. He said, son, if heaven and hell was of no consequence, why would you follow Jesus? Only you can answer that. And when I started looking at that question, I started building community connections. And then I found another agency in the church that was all about building community. And so I was affirmed that I don't have to look the normal way. I'm a senior in college at this point, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to work on my MBA at FAMU. That's going to cost money, but like Neil said, there were a lot of different conferences open. I went to a conference, and me and my father have the same name, and the president at Gammon Theological Seminary, he thought I was my dad because my dad went to seminary. He was like, oh yeah, I heard about you. I know that this is the president of the school, and I'm just rolling with it, like, yeah. But he wound up talking to my president at the time, Dr. David L. Beckley, and I had some good references. And he said, I hear a lot of good things about you. If you are really into theology and you want to grow, stay connected with me. I stay connected with him, and through the church, I wound up getting a full ride to go to seminary.
Yes.
Yet again, I had still not decided that I wanted to be a pastor, but the door keeps opening these churches saying, keep discerning, keep hearing, keep following God. So now I'm in seminary, and seminary was the best, worst theological experience of my life. I'm learning so much, and the stuff that I believe nourished me. I also got the opportunity to sit back, engage, and also reflect on those hurtful theologies that I have, or those hurtful practices, or those things that aren't being talked about because we are at times bogged down with disparity. I got to engage that in seminary, and seminary taught me that sometimes you don't have to have the answer. You just have to be willing to be present and be engaged. And when I didn't think I was going to be a pastor, I got a call from my Bishop Swanson, asking me, "Are you still in the social justice? Are you still in the hip hop?" Because I was still authentically me, right? And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I think we have a place in ministry for you." And I had said a prayer saying that I want to be doing college ministry and teaching at a HBCU, because that's what I'm a product of, and I want to be able to pay it forward. And lo and behold, that's where my ministry has been in the past 7 years. I got to spend 2 years at Alcorn State University. Then I got to go back to my alma mater, Russ College, where I served as chaplain and religion professor. And now I'm at the I Love, Jackson State University. So I don't have all the answers, but even as a pastor, I'm still willing to hear and discern the call that God has on my life. And it's brought me this far.
I love that. I love that. And if anyone's just coming in, go ahead, like, share, comment, tag a friend, let them know to jump on Lit Live tonight. The conversation is going well. We're with Reverend Neil, Christie, and the hip hop Reverend Kevin Kosh. And I love that you shared your story. And for both of you, I see so much faith, so much hope, but also that love of justice. Talk a little bit about, particularly in the context that we're in now with COVID-19, where there seems to be a sense of hopelessness, when there seems to be a lot of frustration, particularly for marginalized community, when we talk about health, when we talk about race, even the conversation of those who've gotten their stimulus checks, whether it's $1,200 or $2,400, in comparison to the millions that the 1% is getting. How did you get to the point where you realize that there's no separation necessarily with church and society, but that your theology is a reflection of justice?
We can go back and forth. It'd be good to hear what Kevin has to say and how we complement each other. What I would say is that we're living in unprecedented times, and the coronavirus, COVID-19, is uncovering. It's really sort of truth serum for this country. I think that it's truly truth serum for this country. Why do I say that? Number one, a certain percentage of the people are required to be patient, to persevere, and to shift their perspective on what it means to survive. And what I'm talking about are the people that are usually left behind, that we don't discuss, the ones who may not know, who getting that check that's been promised is more than what they're going to see, in a month. That's more. It's not enough to pay the bills. I'm not talking about the people who have got money in the bank. I'm not talking about people who have wealth. I'm talking about the people. Think about the scripture because this is the Easter season, where the disciples knew Jesus on the road to Emmaus, and they knew it when they knew Jesus when they walked with Jesus. They didn't recognize who he was, though, right? That's what we're dealing with today. The people who are on the street, while I'm at home, who are walking on the street because they have to. They have no other choice. They're the child care workers, the sanitation workers. They're the healthcare, the first first order healthcare workers, and I'm not talking about physicians and nurses now. I'm talking about healthcare workers who make it possible for the healthcare to be provided in a hospital, people who do the work behind the scenes. I'm talking about the people who pick up our trash. I'm talking about the people who prepare the food behind closed doors. These are the people who are still out there on the street. Do I see Jesus when I see them? Do I see the need there? Do I see the need there? Do I see their resistance and their resilience there? That's the challenge, I think. And I think in this time, theologically, we've got to start shifting the way we understand where we see Jesus, number one. Do we have a prophetic consciousness? Meaning critique what has been fed to us and presumed as true in the media. Remember I said truth serum. This is an opportunity here, friends, to be truthful, to name what's broken, what's not working, and why those oppressions have been kept in place, who has benefited from them and who has not, right? We've got to take a look at that. I'd say from church and society's perspective, we're interested in looking at the pre-existing conditions. So when we talk about healthcare, what are the pre-existing conditions? Pre-existing conditions have to do with people living in poverty. They have to do with rampant racism and xenophobia. It has to do with scapegoating of migrants, immigrants, asylum seekers. It has to do with locking people away in not only in detention centers, but mass incarceration. It has to do with what we don't talk about frequently: domestic violence, mental health and wellness. Each of these fit the priorities for church and society. And I just want to share that with you, and then I'll stop, is we're looking at climate justice, for example. Do we understand how important it is to access water? Today, I was talking with Native American siblings in our church who were saying, Neal, the reality for us on a reservation is we don't have access to clean water. How do you advocate? We need support. We need alliances as we advocate for access to clean water. Our agency has a priority to advocate for climate justice. Another priority is migration and immigration. Well, what do you do when entire groups of people are being told you're seeking asylum, but now are being turned away and being shoved back across the border? When those borders, we know, as Christians, are artificially created. What do you do when a detention center isn't testing and the virus is spreading within a detention center and people are being treated as criminals because they're migrating to save the life of their child and their family? Another priority for my agency is healthcare, access to healthcare. That is a bedrock human right. The United Methodist Principles have advocated that. We've said that since 1972, the birth of the United Methodist Church. We've said that healthcare is a human right. If that is the case, why are so many women, maternal health being denied to women? Why that mental health is not treated on parity with other forms of healthcare? These are issues that are now being brought to light because of the coronavirus, I think. The third priority for my agency is poverty. How do we deal with global poverty? How do we deal with it from a national perspective? This means advocating for living wages for workers. It has to do with questioning whether budgets are moral. It has to do with looking at who is benefiting and who will benefit. The stock market, you said this, Natalie, at the very beginning. The stock market. You've got people who are following the market going up and down, and yet you've got people here with the unemployment rate is in the millions. At the same time, more wealth being built up for this 1%, and you have millions of people who are living, no longer can live paycheck to paycheck. How do you reconcile this as Christians? This world that has these tale of two worlds. And then finally is peace. For our agency, we take seriously the call to be peacemakers and peace builders. And so we're looking at where nations are in conflict. I'll give you an example of where the coronavirus is taking a hit. It's in countries where we have sanctions on countries like Iran and Venezuela. The way that Israel is treating Gaza by locking them out and disallowing food to get into Gaza. So after 50 years of occupation, on top of that, they're starving them. And the disease, the spread of the disease is something that we would expect. So healthcare and peace building is part of our healthcare as well. So as an agency, we are advocating on these issues, and we're looking to advocate with you with others. And we want to focus on people who are most directly impacted by all these issues, by the lack of peace building, the need to escape poverty, the need to address the need for health care, climate justice, migration and immigration. If we work with people who are most directly impacted by these issues, we're being faithful, we're being prophetic, and we're being effective.
So there's two things that you said that really resonated with me for several reasons. And Kevin, I'm going to ask you this question. If you guys are just hopping on, go ahead, like, share, comment. If you have your questions, you can go ahead and put them in the comment section. We're answering them all night. But what's really bubbling up for me as we have conversations with young adults, and the National Network of Young Adults is innovative in that we have centered the voices of ethnic as well as African American young adults. And a lot of the questions that they're having is around this notion of resilience, right? So we know historically the story of our people. We know socially, culturally, what we have done and overcome. But now in COVID-19, this is like you said, Neil, it's unprecedented, and it's impacting all people, all colors, all over the world. What does it really mean to be resilient during this time? And what does it really mean to be to have prophetic consciousness, as you say? And I'm going to ask you to answer that question, Kevin, because you are a campus minister and you are leading in that context where all of the things that Neil talked about are experiencing, whether it's anxiety, whether it's mental wellness, whether it's dealing with clinical depression. How can I know I'm resilient, it's in my DNA, but how do I resist? How do I become and remain a difference maker in light of all of the things that I'm experiencing?
The thing that comes to my mind is scripture, and out of Romans 12:17, it says, faith comes from hearing. And so if faith comes from hearing, what exactly is our faith saying? What has it been saying? And look at those things that inspire you. And when I'm like dealing with college students, a lot of times we want our faith to kind of be loud and we always want to talk. But first we actually have to listen. What is the need? What drives your spirit? What thing kind of like really kind of grinds your gears when you're looking at, man, I feel like my campus could be better, or I'm at school trying to make my community better because back home is like this. Like you probably have a story that tells you why you are where you are and where you want to be. Like my family didn't have this, so I'm going to be the one in my family who gives back, or there's all these issues. So first we got to start finding our voice, and our faith kind of leads us to what that voice will be. As we start finding our voice, we can start defining our voice and start saying, okay, so these are the groups that I want to be a part of, because they kind of like start showing me what my passion is and what that passion looks like being lived out. After I find my voice in this setting, I have to start refining my voice. And this is where it can get very tricky, because when you refine your voice, you start realizing that me and you could be on the same page, but our principles might not always be the same.
Right.
We both want to fight against injustice. We want to fight against racism. We want to kind of bring women's rights to the platform. But sometimes some of your principles will not be the same as mine, but we have to have a common end goal and be strategic around that. And when I'm starting to be strategic and I'm starting to refine my voice, it's less about how I feel and then more about how are we creating structures that will sustain liberation for everybody to be affirmed, involved in an equitable nature. And then we just have to remember that our voice, it matters. Like look at your mentors and talk to them like they're everyday people. A lot of the people who got me into faith and justice work, when I asked them how they got into what they were doing, they gave me simple stories and said things like, I just got involved and I learned along the way.
Yeah, that's simple.
We got
just do it. It's like Nike, right?
Yeah, You got to get involved. And once you start getting involved, then you run into the fatigue that happens on the college campus. You're trying to do your classes. You're trying to do your relationships. You're trying to do something impactful. You want to make everybody proud. So now you have to find a way to get you committed to whatever struggle your faith leads you toward. Mm-hmm. And that takes you being informed, and that takes you being willing to get connected, and not just for resources so that you can put on an event, right, but so you can actually live out what that discipleship really means to you in your context. Mm-hmm. And realize that your context creates a bigger narrative as well. So as I deal with HBCUs, I realize that this is not unique to HBCUs. Other campuses are going through this as well. It's not just college campuses, but the country is going, it's not just America, but this is a world pandemic that's going on. And now I start rethinking what justice is, and somebody else comes along and inspires you to keep going. So it's those little things and those affirmations that can kind of get us committed, but we have to start getting involved. And when you get involved, that's when you find your voice.
Yes.
Can you share with us how the social principles is a tool for that? Because a lot of us know what the issues are. We know that we want to get involved. But can you share how those social principles kind of put meat, puts meat on that bone for us to help us go in a direction theologically as well as spiritually in that direction?
No, I really appreciate what Kevin just said in terms of principles, that our feelings if there's a time to share our feelings, and then there's a time for us to move in where we are in agreement. And our principles may be a little bit different, but our values may be similar. And the end goal is what we want to reach. And the social principles are sort of this is what the social principles are. The social principles are not just words on a paper, they're living word. And so when I think about what we have, at least in the United Methodist Church, we have the Bible, but we interpret the Bible differently. Our songs are going to be a little bit different. What hymns we sing, based on the culture we come from, generation we come from. The United Methodist Church is a global church. So we have over 12 million members that are across sub-Saharan Africa, the Philippines, Russia, Eurasia, and across the United States. We have one set of social principles. You can't change those but those are the social principles for the entire church. Doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what state you live in, they're one set of social principles. I don't agree with all of them, but I'm faithful to them. And I took a vow as an elder in the United Methodist Church to teach the social principles, not uncritically, but I will teach them, but I'll do it times, I'm critical where I need to be critical. The social principles, though, are the positions of the church. They give us a foundation to say, this is where we stand as a church. But if you just stand in one place and you don't move forward, it's kind of limiting. So the social principles also are they represent the interests of the church. So depending on which group we come from, and college campuses are an example of this, you have different competing interests. You have different groups. When we negotiate our interests, we practice what it means to negotiate together so that your interest and my interest, we find some commonality. And when you look closely at the social principles, you'll find that they're the product of our mutual interests and our mediated interests, where we are able to come together, and that you may represent certain interest groups and I may represent others, but together you'll see that both are located within specific social principles. That's not all they are, though. They're not just the platform or the positions we stand on, the interests we reflect. They represent the values, and the values have to do with the tradition. They have to do with the stories that we pass down, the rituals we pass down. I'm grateful because Kevin came to a gathering of young clergy a couple of months ago on Capitol Hill at the Methodist Building, and he led us in a libation ceremony where we remembered through the act of water those ancestors who had come before us and who are very much present with us now. And that was a ritual, and that was a tradition that he gave to those who came from multiracial, multicultural group of young clergy. So the social principles are the values, the story, the rituals that we inherit, that we want to pass down to our children, your children, my children. That's not all they are, though. The social principles respond to the basic human needs that we have, regardless of where we live. Things like food, air, shelter, sense of belonging. When we disagree on our interests, when we disagree even on our values, we disagree on our politics, we all have basic needs. Logically, we call them generic needs. They go across the culture. We all have basic needs. When those needs are unmet, friends, we have conflict, and it can lead to violence. The social principles, I would argue, are a way of dealing with conflict in a healthy way. When we read them, we understand that our society is in conflict. And how do we deal with conflict? We either run from it, or we're frozen, or we engage. And the social principles are a way of dealing with conflict, otherwise known as injustice, in our society in a creative way. We can do this by amplifying our voice, as Kevin said. And that's what it means to be prophetic. It means speaking to our legislators at the local level, the state level, the federal level, and then the international level, because we work through the United Nations and international level too. But it means amplifying our voice. It means writing our stories down. It means using social media to do advocacy. It means building relationships and coalitions with those most directly impacted by an injustice. And the social principles, when you read them, like I said, they're not just words on paper, they're living words. And you'll see that they're the values, the positions, interests, and they respond to the human needs that we have. And we don't have enough time today, but we could go through every one of the 50, 60 social principles, and we would have more than enough questions about every one of them, I'm sure.
Well, we actually do have a question, and it is surrounding the social principles in the church, and either you or Kevin could answer it. So this person is asking, is there a gray line in the uncertainty of the United Methodist Church when it comes to transformative justice and restorative justice? So that's a you guys have fun.
So Kevin can so the social principles talk about make a distinction between retributive justice and restorative justice. Retributive justice is based on a penalty. It's based on causing someone, if harm has been done, well, then the court takes responsibility for it, and the person who's been directly harmed is not part of the equation. Okay, that's the way that our civil courts, our criminal courts have been set up. That's not restorative justice. Restorative justice says that the relationship is paramount, it is priority. We want to restore some semblance of humanity to the relationship, and we don't want to dehumanize someone who's broken that covenant, okay? And so how do we move from a society based on retributive justice to restorative justice? Now, transformational justice is another form, is the next level. I mean, it's that
highest.
I would say the highest form, yeah. You know, it's the next level. But transformative justice has multiple forms. It has to do with cultural justice. So whose culture is recognized in the public space, in the common space. It has to do with distributive justice. How do goods get distributed equitably in a society? It has to do with economic justice. It has to do with political justice. Juridical justice. Is the rule of law applied equally to all people, regardless of their skin tone and skin color and their nationality? So the jurisprudence ought to reflect the rule of law. So there's a juridical justice. So there are different forms of justice that the social principles ultimately point to. But it's not enough for us to have a blanket understanding of justice. We've got to nuance our understanding of what does transformation look like. What are the multiple levels of transformation in a particular community, and how can we express that to persons who want to be allies outside of our community?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's amazing, and that brings a question that I think, Kev, you can really speak to, because we are the National Network of Young Adults. We're all about leadership, innovation, and transformation. So, for you, what does transformation look like for leaders between 18 to 35 that are not only trying to figure out their lives, but are trying to figure them out in the midst of COVID and are trying to be those transformational leaders? How do I garner myself from that fatigue while being resistant and resilient?
That's a loaded question statement right there, but I think one of the
make it simple and practical, because it's like, how do I wake up every day and
yeah. Well, so like when we're looking at whether it's the social principles or whether you're looking at your mentor or whether you're looking at somebody in the history book, realize that you have a space there too.
Mm.
You being recognized, like you bring that value. There's an African proverb that says, until the lion tells his own story, the hunter will always be glorified.
Yes.
You have the responsibility to start telling that story. So what does transformation look like? It looks like when you can authentically be yourself in that space, but then you also are informed. Because it's not just so that we can be in the space. Freedom is a responsibility to create and maintain. So once we get there, it's my job not only just to provide a seat at the table and make sure that I'm protecting that space and inviting others in, but I also have the responsibility for those who don't know what it's like to sit in my seat at the table to articulate that. Mm-hmm. And that's where it gets frustrating, because for so long we have sat in a position to where we said, nobody wants to hear me. And now when we find ourselves in the position to where we are creating, and then we even have people of like minds, sometimes we don't know what to say because our voice has been restricted for so long. So we have to start kind of being our authentic selves and realize that freedom doesn't mean we do whatever we want, but freedom still comes with accountability. Freedom is a constant struggle. And so it's not going to be easy. A lot of times freedom is our promised land. And I think that even as pastors, the way that we talk about heaven or the way that we talk about the promised land, theologically, it sets us up to say, once I get to this point, it's over. Once I get to Easter, it's over. COVID-19 is over once Jesus rises from the grave.
You guys are setting it off. Okay, so Latricia Scriven, shout out to her from FAMU, says, this is good stuff. Lamont Wells says, when teaching the principles, how important is it to keep reality parallel to the script that is given to teach? Does that make sense?
That's really good.
Yeah.
What a question. So that's such a great question. And so, I mean, the script is living script. I mean, there's no dead script. It's like every moment is a new moment. Every experience, it becomes part of your toolkit when you teach the social principles. So my only advice, this is my only guidance I'd offer, is that when you look at the social principles, again, whose perspective does it reflect? And whose perspective does it not reflect? If you go online, you'll see there's a new set of social principles that we're proposing for the General Conference in 2021. We want to encourage you to go and take a look, because this is now a revised social principles written from a global perspective that prioritizes the voice of those who have been historically marginalized in our society, nationally and internationally, globally. And so I invite you to take a look at those social principles. With the script is there in that we know what the church says and where the church stands. Like I said, it's not enough just to sort of stand where you are. You got to move, right? You got to move in some direction. So I think you're informed by experience as Wesleyan United Methodists.
Yes.
We all do this, I think. It's experience, tradition, reason, and what? Scripture. And scripture is the foundation, but our experience interprets the scripture, our ability to reason, the intellect, our ability to be critical, to have that critical consciousness of empire, critical consciousness of where power, privilege, and oppression are functioning at every level, from microaggressions to systems, larger systems. That is a necessity. It is an expectation, and it's a responsibility. As Kevin said, that's part of our responsibility. So we bring those tools. We bring all those tools that are part of our Wesleyan identity, our heritage, and we apply it to the script. We apply it to the principles. And I invite you to take a look at the case studies. Look at a social principle in relation to an injustice that's in your own community, or what you're reading in on social media, where you're reading in the press. Read it side by side. Read the social principles here, and then read the reality of the times in the other hand.
And that's so good, because Lamont also followed up and said, I think transformation has to start with the reality of what you're trying to transform.
Yes.
Um, and that level of awareness is so important. Can you talk a little bit about in terms of where we are with COVID-19 and then where we are as a church, and how, as a transformational leader, um, how are you engaging? What are some things that personally, as you lead yourself and you lead others, you're very much in tune and aware of right now?
I think one thing that comes to mind is as we're in this space right now, realizing that we have been here before.
Yeah.
Like we have to open up our textbooks. We have to start asking questions to people in our families. We have to start looking at documentaries on it. You can look it up on Google, look it up on YouTube, and you'll start realizing that humanity is resilient, period. And so when we start looking at those things, we start getting a gauge on, okay, so we've been here before. How has it been handled?
Yeah.
And then we also start looking at, okay, so since I'm here, what's my place in it now? Since Easter just passed, it makes me think about Jesus being crucified and what that church initially looked like. People were in their house afraid. They had their beliefs, they had their values. They weren't going outside because being associated with Christ could have got them killed as well.
Listen, can we put a pin right there, because that is so real. And you know, as African American woman who's the child of immigrants, who is leading a network of young adults, and Kev, you could feel this as well. When you are that voice, when you are a transformational leader, that doesn't come without tension.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that tension? Because there's people who feel like, you know what, I don't even want to fight the system anymore. I don't even want to deal with that
Right.
stress.
So using scripture to kind of be the guide, like looking at what the Israelites had to kind of go through to get to all the markers that we still talk about to this day. When you are being transformational, just because you get to where you want to go, you still have to think about what's next. The Hebrew people were in bondage. Then they got to a sea and had to cross it. And then after they crossed it, it was like, what's next? And then after manna, they were receiving manna. It was like, then what's next? When they actually make it to the promised land, then they have a wall of Jericho. Like, this, what? And guess what? They didn't have a budget for none of this stuff. What? Hello, Black church. So,
like, it's been there. But the thing that stands out most is the resiliency. Because we don't have doesn't mean we won't act.
That's right.
Wow.
Because I don't know doesn't mean I won't be engaged and I can't find out. And I'm willing to tell you my story. When we look at the scriptures, Moses fell several times. David fell several times. We got to stop telling this romanticized story so that we can start being critically engaged. And sometimes we don't want to deal with the criticism. I don't want somebody to hold me accountable, or I don't want to have to rethink what has happened, but it's been there. So as we find ourselves in these times, it's like this isn't the first time like that humanity has seen like a big plague. Faith has still persisted. Humans have still persisted. In reality, the Methodist tradition goes way back. We talk about John Wesley, but just think about it. Methodism doesn't look initially how he planned it, because he was a campus pastor. It turned into a denomination, and that denomination broke off. The Methodist Church is fairly new. It started in 1968. So there have been these breaks along the way, and that's going to be difficult. And a lot of time when we talk about the promised land, we just kind of make it seem like God just opened up all these doors, and having faith and following God is an easy thing. And a lot of times that is also disconnected with what that means in reality. So we also have to know our context, because some communities are ready to move and ready to go just by what you present. And sometimes the act of justice is going to be you actually setting them up so that they can actually have an informed conversation that's not just built around their bias or yours. And
Right.
so sometimes transformation happens, but it doesn't look like we want it to happen. Hello, Easter sermon. Come on, Christ, Palm Sunday. Christ didn't look like what we thought.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, are we making those connections?
Yeah.
And I love if Christ was in some of our churches today, he'd get kicked out.
Yeah. Well, when you come in,
Right.
maybe I want to come in. And one thing I want to share is that I'm borrowing this from my wife. My wife's a therapist, and so she'll say this to her clients is, so what else is true? In other words, when people start to only say this is not working, this is what not working, this is what I'm going up against, this is the struggle. Well, what else is true? And meaning there's got to be more. There's got to be hope is there, but it's not enough for us to say hope is there. It's important to listen and to question, and to ask the question, what else is true? And if we keep asking that question, we're probably going to find that there's more resilience than we imagine, and that it's coming from places we least expect. And I want to give, and this is the pastoral side of me. I have to say it before we end, because I don't want to lose it. Is it's important for us to focus on our resources, and a resource can be scripture, it can be a song, it can be a piece of art, it can be a person, it could be your child, it could be a relationship, a grandparent. Whatever it is, whoever it is, what is the resource? Who is the resource that you bring to mind, you bring back to yourself when you're starting to feel that level of anxiety and you just don't know what this is an anxious time. If you're a student, if you're a campus minister, if you're a pastor, a layperson, it is an anxious time. Everything is uncertain. Your own health is uncertain, your family's health is uncertain, your community health is uncertain. It's important to recognize the resources we have and to come back to them and to keep bringing them back to our body and bring them back to ourselves. And the second thing I'd say is to ground ourselves, is to recognize that in every moment we have an opportunity to ground ourselves. And what happens is we sort of lose it. We lose ourselves, and we misunderstand, as Kevin was talking about freedom, we forget what freedom is. Freedom actually ought to bring us back to ourselves and who we are, to ground us in who we are, who we've been. Those are spiritual practices. Those are practices that every one of us can do to ground ourselves, to recognize where our resources are, and then to ask ourselves, what else is true? What else is true?
I love that. Can you both share, as I put up this website? Thank you so much for joining us. If you're just tuning in again, like, share, comment. Rich discussion we've been having today, life-giving. What else is true? And with that, you talked a little bit about resources, and you talked about mentoring earlier, Kevin. Can you share for those people who are watching that are saying, I need some resources. Where can I go to really enrich myself as a leader, as well as become more involved and more informed about ways that I can advocate and do justice well during this time?
I would start by the people that you have been in contact with. Like, sometimes you don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you are on a college campus, get involved with your student engagement. Ask them, what ways can we be involved? This is what this does. The campus that you're on is also in a position of, we don't know what to do next. And when you say that I'm willing to help you engage, your voice has now been being brought to the forefront.
Right.
Talk to your professors. A lot of times we just have a relationship with our professors for the grade. Like, I'm just here to do my work. That's it. Like, you can't have, sometimes ask the question like, yo, so what are you interested in? Or tell them what you're interested in, because you don't know what resources they have. So without overwhelming yourself, start with the resources that you do have. One, you have your student engagement, or the people, or that person on campus that you feel that you can talk to at any time. Ask them, and they can direct you in a resource that can help you. Talk to your professors, because they probably have a resource that can also help you. And then also reach out to your family members and your local congregation, because some people have resources that they are willing to give away. They have opportunities because your presence is an act of resistance within itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People have to see you. So sometimes people want to give those resources out, and then also you never know when you just ask the question. So the people that's in front of you, ask, send
That's
email.
good. That's good. Being proactive to find the things that you need. Neil, can you answer that question for our young clergy out there? So we
Uh,
have young clergy who are leading congregations at this
yes.
and are like, I didn't learn this in seminary.
No, you definitely didn't learn in seminary. Neither did I. But what you did learn, I bet you all of you did learn is, and just reminding ourselves, what does it mean to be a non-anxious presence?
Right.
The gift we can give to people who are looking at us and looking at us for leadership is modeling what it means, even in the most difficult. That anxiety is not going to put a chain around me. That I'm just not going to let that happen. And I have to ask myself that question when I'm with a group. When I was a pastor, I asked myself that question. When I'm in a relationship with one of my interns, trying to mentor them, a theological student, I've got to try my best to hold on to my own issues and
Right.
to also say, well, Lord, where God, where's the good news? Where's your spirit actually working together to do something new here and to settle it and to bring us to a new place? The resources I would encourage you to take a look at as you're interpreting the impacts of this time and this virus. Of course, I'm going to ask you to go to Church and Society's website. I'm going to ask you to please take a look at what we have online and the colleagues that we have on Church and Society who are there to work with you. We have advocacy staff that are ready to work with your conferences, local churches, caucuses. And so we're great conversation partners. So we really, really invite you to be in conversation with us, to contact us through our website. I'd also invite you to go to Religion and Race's website. We have beautiful, wonderful, talented colleagues who are there to help you interpret some of these issues within their own context. I would invite you to work through BMCR, Strengthening the Black Church, to work with the other national plans and the ethnic caucuses in the church and the resources that they offer. And then I would ask you to work with your conference boards of church and society and your peace with justice coordinators. They're people who are trying to work on strategies that go beyond one local church. So you don't have to be alone in the journey. So one congregation can be in partnership with another congregation that has similar priorities. And it's the peace with justice coordinators, it's the church and society chairs who are going to have some of that knowledge base that you want to tap into. I want to invite you to do, especially young pastors, to again think through this theologically. That is a gift, and that is a skill you can pass on to your parishioners. They don't have the same training you've got. They have various professions and vocations, but you're the one called to bring a theological perspective into the community. Don't let go of that right now. They need that, and that's a perspective we're not going to hear necessarily in the media. Is where is grace? How do we interpret suffering? What does resilience look like in terms of our understanding of salvation? What does it mean to be community? A community that comes from the cross, the grave, the table. Those are all questions that I invite you to struggle with, and we are ready to partner with you in those conversations.
Awesome. Our interim director, Tosca Medlock Lee, is on the line, and she said, great conversation. Thank you so much. And we are enjoying it. For those of you who are tuning in, go ahead, like, share, comment now. This is going to be our resistance and resilience series. So we'll be coming back every month, same time, same place. And we'll be talking about ways that you can be resourced as a transformational leader to resist and to stay resilient in your leadership during this time, whether it's addressing social justice issues or it's dealing with and leading through COVID-19. And we want to hear from you. So go ahead and let us know in the comments. And this will be our last word. So I'll have you close us out, Neil, and make some kind of give us like your last nugget of the night.
Last nugget of the night.
And then go ahead and ask the question, what is it that you want to hear from us to help shape this conversation as we co-create it with leaders across our connection?
We need to hear from you. I think it is imperative that we hear from you, those who are most directly impacted by this crisis in your communities. I invite you to be in conversation, to stay in touch, to let us know what's going on. And I go back to your original question then, Nathalie, to Kevin and to me, and it had to do with call. And this is something I want to pass on to those who are here with us tonight, is discern what your call is in this time. And to do that, I just want to leave you with this. You can put your call into one sentence. It's not that complicated. It's one sentence. Feed the hungry, liberate the oppressed, save the children, care for the sick. One sentence. People are going to believe it's impossible. They're not going to believe you can accomplish it, because you can't accomplish it without God. But they're still going to say it's impossible. Don't believe them. Third thing is it's not going to let you go. If it's a real call from God, it is not going to let you go.
Yeah.
So I want to invite you in this season to do those three things. Imagine your call. Envision your call. Put it in one sentence. Recognize people are going to say it's impossible. Don't believe them. And then recognize it's not going to let you go until you pursue it. And so I want to thank you for participating. Thank you for joining us in this.
Thank you so much. Kevin, your last nugget of the night.
We went over so much. I don't think
I'm out of nuggets. I gave it all.
out of nuggets. This matters.
Next month.
Right. Yeah. No, just know that this matters. Like what we're doing, people are saying, how can we engage? How can we move forward? What you do matters, because 20 years down the line, if something else happens, they're going to say, this is how people gather. This is how people engage. Like, you're doing the work now. So know that it matters. So make sure that you're putting your best foot forward, and it's okay to make mistakes. Like, what you do matters. That's the nugget. What you do matters. Don't give up. What you do matters.
What you do matters. Who you are matters. We love you. We want to hear from you. So as we co-create this conversation together, go ahead. Let us know in the comments what it is. What is the issue that is burning inside of you? What is that call that God has placed on your heart that you just can't shake, like Neil said? What is the thing that is the first thing you think about when you wake up in the morning? It's the last thing that you think about at night. I have a sneaky suspicion that that is the thing that God is calling you not only to do in the world, but calling you to be and to be a difference maker. And we love you, and we want to support you. We want to resource you. So let us know in the comments, how can we help you co-create this conversation and give you the tools as well as the resources that you need to be who God has called you to be for such a time as this. Well, that's it. That's all. I'm Nathalie Nelson Parker, your program coordinator for the National Network of Young Adults. You can connect with us by, of course, following us on Facebook as well as Instagram. You can go to sbc21.org. We are here to support, to recruit, to support, and to resource transformational leaders like you. Can't wait to see you. We'll be back here next week, same time, same place. And until then, stay lit, leading in transformation.